Hello, I think most of you know me. My name's Andy Kippax. I'm a Strategic Housing Leader with the Council. I oversee the work of Stockport Homes as your managing agent and landlord of your properties. Each year I have the delights of coming talking to representatives from the residents out there about the rents and service charge increases that are proposed by the Council. Clearly this year we can't do that in the way that we would normally do it with a face-to-face presentation. So we're going to do this by filming and putting this on the website, and you will have the opportunity then to feed back in with your comments on the back of that. So what I'm going to do is run through the proposed increases and the reasons why we've got those increases, and then give you the opportunity then to feed back in for members to consider at the end of the presentation. If we can start off first of all by recapping on the current position. Some of you will recall that the government introduced a 1% rent reduction for 4 years from April the 16th to March 2020. That of course has now ended, and this year you had the first rent increase following the relaxation on the allowance of rents to be increased. This reduced expected income for Council and Stockport Homes by £19 million it's 2020-21, and in total, if you look at the cumulative impact over the 30-year business plan, it took out somewhere in the region of £217 million from the expected expenditure that we would have available to spend on the housing stock. The capitalist investment programme has obviously been reduced to help balance the books over this, but we have got significant pressures going forward, and I'm just going to run through some of those for you. The position in Stockport over the 4 years of rent reductions has seen the Stockport housing revenue account average rents reduced by something like £2.64 a week. This is an average, so some will have faced more or lesser decreases. If rents had increased by inflation only over this period, they would on average be £10.69 pence per week more than they currently are. Now, the calculation for calculating social rents is covered by a government guidance, but within this there are some flexibilities. Within Stockport homes rents are some of the lowest amongst Greater Manchester, and certainly the lowest amongst the house associations operate within Stockport. Government policy from 2025 is now to allow rents to increase by up to CPI, that's a measure of inflation, plus 1%, with annual increases from 2020 to 2025. Again, some of you may recall that last year we brought for consultation a new rent strategy being developed to align with this policy. This was considered by residents in July 2019, and it was approved by the Council in August 2019. So this sets out the approach the Council intends to take over this 5-year period. This consultation that we're looking at now is in addition to that strategy. So whilst the strategy sets the baseline for rent increases, the Council does have the option to override that on a particular year, and that's why this consultation today is so important. So just a few pictures of some of the things that we do out there with the monies that we get in from the rents. Clearly we manage the stock and maintain the stock as well, and you can see some of the improvements there that have been carried out recently. I think that's in Offerton, and of course things like the solar panels that have got on the roofs. And again, with things like that, we use those as an investment, and we do get income back out of the solar panels. But this all does cost money. New bathrooms and kitchens, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the works around that. We abide by the government requirements around decent homes and ensure they are replaced as and when they should be. And of course there are general repairs and maintenance carried out as well. New build, we have a large programme of new build through Viaduct. This is funded partly through the Council's housing revenue account, and of course the rents do come back in to cover the cost of that, and partly directly through Stockport Homes with loans from the Council. And we're producing some excellent results with that, and we're producing somewhere in the region of 200 new housing units a year. These are just a few of the examples of the work that's going on around that. We're doing an awful lot of work towards carbon reduction and improving the energy efficiency of properties, and again these are just some of the examples. Biomass boilers at the top left, the insulation works that are going on in re-roofs, and of course things like the solar panels. In addition to that, we've also had other challenge with things like the sprinkler systems, which we're now installing in all 22 tower blocks to make sure that those blocks are absolutely safe for our customers that live within them. Rent setting for this year, for 21-22, which would start in the coming April, is to follow the approved rent strategy that I mentioned before that was approved last summer. This would follow the CPI, inflation, plus 1% for all social and affordable rents. Shared ownership rental, the rental amount on shared ownerships would increase in line with the legal leases that have been set up separately for those properties. CPI this September was only 0.5%, and this was less than was expected. So this means that the rents would increase by CPI, the 0.5%, plus 1%. And the rent increase will support the capital investment programme. It's worth noting that the extra money that we get all goes entirely into that capital programme. The formula that we have with Stockport Homes around payments of the management fee is a set formula. So the entire increase goes into the investment in the actual stock itself, on the sorts of things that I've outlined previously. So, as I said, the average weekly rents would be increasing by 1.5% if we follow the rent strategy. And the purpose of this consultation is to get your views back to members as to whether we do go down that route. What does that mean in practice? Well, for 97% of our customers on social rents, that would be an increase of approximately £1.12 per week. For those on affordable rents, and they're not a huge number of these, it's about 2% of customers, the rent increase would be about £1.88 per week. Nearly 50%, this is nearly 50% less than previous year's increase, and this is entirely down to the fact that inflation is so low this year. But following that route would give us those sorts of increases. If this is approved, and it is back to members to approve this, in April 2021, rents will be only around the same as they were 6 years ago. So if you recall, the rents have been reducing for 4 years. This year we've had an increase. This increase in April would put the rents back to exactly the same monetary level as they were back in 2015-2016. So we are effectively just caught up to where we started before the rent reductions. These rents now are less than half the cost of private rents in Stockport. Private rents in Stockport have continued to increase and are now more than twice the cost of all social rents within the borough. And as I mentioned previously, the council rents are less than that charged by other registered housing providers in Stockport, and they are considerably cheaper in the vast majority across the northwest. Service charges. Service charges are paid for additional services which are not covered by the rent. Some of these are covered by housing benefit and universal credit for those on that. Some of these aren't, and I'll go through some of the detail of that afterwards. There are a whole range of service charges out there, and I don't propose to go through every individual one, but what I will do as part of this presentation is go through the cumulative impacts, the worst case scenarios for residents out there, so you'll understand the impact of this. The principle behind service charges is that they should cover the cost of what the actual service costs for the service that's been provided. So in other words, it shouldn't be subsidised by the remainder of the residents out there through the housing revenue account. And that's a principle that's been set out through government, and we try to follow wherever possible. The forecasted overall difference between the cost of the services and what's actually brought in through the service charges for last year is expected to be somewhere in the region of £797,000. This would reduce to £232,000 if we were able to follow the proposed service charge increases for this coming year. For 21-22, again from this coming April, the existing charges currently being modelled are based around a general application of the formula set out for the rents, which is the CPI inflation plus 1%, which currently, as we've said previously, is 1.5%. So for most charges where there is a deficit, we'll be looking at an increase in 1.5%. There's a general principle of freezing charges for services forecast to cover costs and increasing for services otherwise. So if the service charges that are currently covering those costs, we would not be increasing those service charges anymore. We cannot make a profit out of these. But where there's a shortfall, this is where we'd look to apply the increase. Communal electricity costs needs to keep pace with market increases to control deficit, and that's one of the challenges we've got. Specific increases for services with significant investment works or where charges are representative are also ones that we need to consider in terms of where we put the increases onto these service charges. So, just looking at some examples and what the impact is around this in terms of applying the proposals. Proposals where CPI plus 1% does not apply are mainly charges frozen for all customers. And if we look at those I've listed below here, that includes individual heating, district heating schemes, so there will be no increases for 1,437 customers benefiting from those district heating schemes. For individual heating with storage heaters, there's a small number for that, and for window cleaning services. Communal electricity charges. The scale of increases are based on financial position of each site. So this does vary from site to site. It's not the same across the piece. We're in an improved position from previous years, and what we've set out there are the proposed number of customers that will receive an increase and the increases alongside. So the first column sets out the increase per week from 0 to 50p, 51p to £1, etc. For this coming year, the proposal is the vast majority of customers, or rather a significant number of customers, would see no increase whatsoever. Just over 1,099 customers would see an increase of up to 50 pence, and 1,100 customers would see an increase of between 51 pence and £1. We don't propose to apply any increases of more than £1 for any customer, as we've set out there. Now, this differs from last year. Last year, the charges were more spread out, and that was partially down to the way that the inflation affected these figures. But you can see there that some customers within that were being charged last year did face increases of of a few pounds. That will not be the case if we follow this model going forward this coming year. Grounds maintenance. The proposed increases for grounds maintenance per week are set out in the table there. For 6,146 customers, the increase per week will be between a penny and 10 pence. For 806 customers, between 11 pence and 20 pence, and for 33 customers, between 21 and 27 pence. Caretaking. Again, the scale of increases is based on financial position for each area, but again, we've set out below how many customers would be affected by those proposed increases. 258 customers would see no increase using the proposal we're putting forward. The vast majority, 3,617, would see an increase of between 4 pence and 30 pence per week, with 198 seeing an increase between 31 pence and 50 pence, and 153 customers seeing an increase between 51 pence and 80 pence. Concierge charges. There's been a small increase for most customers, for others to bring it in line with where charges had historically been lower. So again, this is levelling up and trying to offset those deficits we talked about before. The increase per week for the majority of customers, that's 1,501 customers, would be 8 pence. And for the remaining 498, it will be up to 61 pence. Entry phone and communal TV aerials, intensive housing and management, the proposal is for a flat rate of 10 pence per week increase across those service areas. And again, that's reflective of the shortfall and the increased costs associated with that. Communal laundry. This proposed increase for that is 14 pence per week, which would be an increase for the 320 customers that benefit from that. And again, that's to keep pace with utility price increases, so it's covering the costs that we're having to expend associated with that. This, I think, is probably one of the most important slides here, and what this looks at is the cumulative impact of those charges. There are a lot of charges out there. People face different charges, and of course what people want to know is, well, what is the impact for me? What is it going to cost me on a weekly basis? So what we've done is we've tried to calculate this for customers out there to give indications to how many customers would be affected. And what we've done here is set out the charges that are applicable for people who benefit from housing benefit and universal credit. So the increases are set out on the left-hand side there, and for charges that are not HB or UC eligible. But the line at the top brings all that a lot together. So for people who are on housing benefit or universal credit, the maximum weekly increase they will face that they have to pay themselves, i.e. that isn't covered by housing benefit, will be £1 per week. If you're not in receipt of housing benefit or universal credit, the maximum weekly increase you would face would be £3 per week. We are also proposing a new service charge. This is limited to a number of the tower blocks out there, and it has been subject to separate consultation around this. We are bringing forward a proposal for members to consider as part of this. The work so far on this has been very much a pilot to look at providing Wi-Fi system that covers the whole of the blocks for residents living there. And we are working up more detail on this, but this would come forward as a proposal for those residents living within those blocks. It would initially apply to new customers coming in there or for people who want to partake in it, but we are looking at how that can be changed going forward, and that will come forward as a more detailed report. So, in terms of conclusions, what we're proposing is that the rent increases for next year would be in line with the agreed rent strategy as was approved last year, i.e. that rent increases would be 1.5%, that's CPI plus 1%. The situation with the service charges it would leave us in an improved position. The service charges I've outlined will be a maximum increase of £1 per week for people on housing benefit and universal credit to pay personally, or a maximum of £3 per week for those that are not on benefits. These recommendations will then be incorporated into a final report which will be taken forward for consideration by, first of all, a Cabinet member and then by scrutiny and finally by the full Cabinet and Council for the rent increase and service charge increases to apply from next April. As part of that report, we will incorporate all comments and concerns, issues raised by yourselves as part of this process. So I would encourage you, if you feel that you do want to make comments back on any of these proposals, to provide those back through the channels that we've provided through the website or through Stockport Homes. Thank you for listening and take care.